Doing very well, and so happy to be back with everybody here. And believe me, the pleasure is all mine to work with you. And thinking it's going to be a really good show for the audience tonight. So I wish I did. I tried doing that a few times. It's just so complicated and stuff. The trouble is with a lot of the shows in the last, say, 5 to 8 years or so, they're mostly recorded shows. I do live shows, but they're sort of limited. So maybe I should just maybe revisit that and just put out where it's going to be live because when it's recorded, it could come out anywhere from the same day to 6 months. And I don't know the schedule that they're going to edit and release. So, but yeah, I'll have another look at that for the live ones because, like I do, like this one, every first Wednesday at the same time at 8 Eastern. So I could have a permanent posting up for that. That's a good idea. I should revisit that. So for people who are trying to get hold of me, go to my website at the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that website, there's a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book one, all 84 chapters of book two. There's a contact the author, do be patient. I'm back. I did have my response time down to 2 months about 6 weeks ago. It's back up to 3 months with the volume and the other activities that I'm doing, but I will continue to work at it. So be patient. I will get back to you. And if you wanted to support me, you can go to the Buy Now page to get a copy of either book one or book two or a combination of both. Buy page one is for book one. Buy page two is for book two. Buy page three does the bundling. You can get discounts on buy page one and two, but you're only ordering more of the same book. So make sure that you're on the right page. And if you did want to, and you ordered it through either by page one or by page two, just send me an email. I do review the emails every day for purchases coming in, just in case somebody wanted one of each and they made that mistake or they have a custom signing. So um, that's the easiest way to support me. And if you wanted to buy it through another source, that's fine by me as well. So I actually have links up there for Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Also over to Amazon for the Kindle version of each, right on the buy pages, right on the front page of the website, and also for the Audible version. So that's the easiest, fastest way to support me and to order one of my books. And for things that are coming up, if people wanted to see me in person, I will be in Dallas on October 25 and 26 with the Jeremiah Skiba and Jake Grant conference, TrutherCon. And so I will be speaking on the first day, but I will be on the floor for both days. I'll have a small table set up and I'll have books to sign if people want that. If you have books already, you want to come in and have me sign them because you bought them through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever, I do that as well. And feel free to ask me questions when I'm there. And I try to be on the floor all the time, or as much as possible while the conference is open. So, looking forward to meeting people. That's in Dallas at the end of October, and hopefully, if there's still some tickets available, go to their website, truthercon.com, and you can purchase tickets there. A couple other things for people to be aware of. And I'm starting to talk a little bit about this project in the last couple of weeks. We've got the novel, and notice the word novel, off to the publisher, and the co-author actually is my publisher, who wanted to do a more fiction book on the end time. So we collaborated. He does the plot and the character development, and then I provide the material for all of the characters in terms of what would their bloodlines be, what secret societies would they be part of, what would be an interesting name, have locations, whether it's, and again, whether or not it's for the names or the locations, those are all not chosen out of coincidence. So hopefully people will start Googling some of the sites and some of the names and say, well, where the heck did that name come from? And it starts to tell you a little bit more about the character. And it's going to be called the Primo Conspiracy. And if the subtitle sticks, it will be AI's covenant with Babylon. And the premise is it will follow an end time chronology that runs very close to how I set things down for people and in my approach in the literal sort of manner. And so it's like a Da Vinci Code, or it's like similar to the mythopoetic style. So the characters are fictional, but based on what we think might be the case. And the events that we're putting in are basically fictional, but following the pattern of end time prophecy. So I expect, because it's didn't get through even the seals, but it got through the first 3 to 4 seals, that we'll be doing a sequel if the book takes off, and it's to give people just a better understanding of how the end time might come to play, and how AI, specifically how AI is going to play a large role. Not yet. Not not yet. Not yet. Yeah. So the advantage though with the publisher is they have the ability to streamline the process. So when they're comfortable to get the date out to Amazon, because you have to meet those dates, otherwise they punish you. They'll get it through, and I'm hoping that it's like 6 months. Um, before the release. So, but I just want to start getting it out there. And Oprimo is a Latin word, if people aren't familiar with that. And the AI is called the Oprimo wall. And so, primo is Latin for oppress, to crush, to overwhelm. So you start to look at some of the names and the relationship as to Babylon and the Ten King Empire, particularly the Ten King Empire that basically crushes everything that gets in their way. Yeah. Well, obviously, it'll be based on success of the first story, although the publisher can do what he kind of wants, so he may continue to push through on it. Um, so yeah, it's he wanted to do the whole 7 years in 100,000 words, and I kind of said, out of the gate, that's not going to work. You have no idea how much information is out there on this kind of stuff, and so we left it with a cliffhanger that sets up the sequel that will continue with that end time sort of chronology. And that's a great idea, Zen, on maybe doing like History Channel like documentaries on certain topics. And coincidentally or uncoincidentally, I just did a pilot on Monday for recording to go back to the producers who have funded the pilot and the second show. That will be a series on Hollow Earth. And I'm playing hopefully a prominent role if it takes off and gets the funding. But we did the filming for that, and it'll be done in like a ancient alien History Channel type documentary. So um, and my role there is to bring the not only all my knowledge on other religions and history and mythology, but to bring the biblical aspect into that, and which is usually that gets to be a bit of a deal breaker if I want to talk anything about what's in the Bible, unless it's in the way that they want it talked about, and then they usually get taken off the list, but not this time. So I'm hoping the project goes through. And Hollow Earth is not my big topic that I talk about, but I do recognize it is a common legacy, like giants, like pyramids, like little people all around the earth. So I am somewhat familiar with it in probably humble sort of terms there, maybe a little bit deeper than what most people might know, because I don't talk about it a lot, but it is part of that ancient legacy. Yeah, that was a good series. Yeah. Yep. Right. No, I haven't, but I'll be looking for them. I did get actually, Damon did one other book as well after the Lost Book of King Og, and the name of it was the Book of Lamech of Cain. Yeah, yeah, and yep, yep, and their take on the mark of Cain was that pale white color of the Nephilim. That was his mark in terms of. So yeah, continually doing more research and also trying to make some time going forward to get completed book 3 in the Genesis 6 conspiracy. So those are the main things that are on my list. So as new research, probably just kind of more of what I've already known, but I am keeping an eye on what's going on under the Great Pyramid, and how that plays into things. And I continue to follow what's happening on AI with great interest to see what that's doing. But I wouldn't say, I have anything because I speak, on shows like 5, 6, 7 times a week. So I'm talking about things that I'm, kind of learning all of the time. Sure. That's fine. So, hello, audience. Question number one, and this one came in last show, and I didn't really want to sort of get into it. I wanted to refresh my mind a little bit on it, and because I wasn't sure whether we were talking about Sabbateans or Sabians, or what sort of sect of the mystical group that was being talked about. And the question is how do the Sabbateans fit into the power hierarchy of the elites? Playing out to this day. And a person by the main name of Moonlight with a Y had sent that in. So that's how do the Sabbateans fit into the power hierarchy of the elites playing out to this day? So this is not a modern group, the Sabbateans, and it's not the Sabians. This is a distinct group that's going to be funded and founded in the 1600s, the late 1600s, by a fellow by the name of Sabbatai Zevi. And also, Lisa was talking about the Sabbateans and the Franks. It's not in the question, but it's a related question. And that was a group that was founded by Jacob Frank after the creation of the Sabbateans. And so let's say 100 years after that, maybe a little bit less. And it's very, very similar and actually is an extension out of the Sabbateans. So, what is the Sabbateans? They were a Jewish mystical group, and they had a very strong Messianic belief. So that Sabbatai Zevi was thought to be within their belief system and their organization to be the Messiah. So it's Messianic and it's mystical or polytheist. So kind of a version of the Gnostic Lord Maitreya or Antichrist as we would know biblically and way back then. So these are Messianic, but mystical Messianic groups. And so they're kind of a fringe group, if you can actually use that sort of terminology of Kabbalism. So they are Kabbalists, but they're, again, very much Messianic focused with their own leaders as that sort of Messianic belief goes. And so, but Kabbalist nonetheless. So we should understand them that sort of way because Kabbalism is deeply embedded into the secret societies, not at the top, but grafted in as part of the groups. And one would deduce because all of the top thelemic tree organizations of the tree trunk, which the organizational structure with a trunk with branches like a cedar of Lebanon that goes down, intersect, and those would be all the different types of branch organizations with that descendant hierarchy within that. So within the trunk, you have certain groups, and the purebloods are located at the top. So 13 families below that, the 33 families, also known as the invisible ones, and the council or the committee of 300 families. And then the top half of the Rosicrucians would also be pureblood or as pure as they could have those associations. So when we look at Kabbalism, it mixes in through some bloodline and psioning or grafting of some of the Davidic and Benjamite bloodlines into the bloodlines of the Gnostic bloodlines and lines that, at least in their own self-appraisal and image, they would produce a dragon messiah or the Antichrist as we would understand it. But they would not be at the top. So you would have them somewhere at the Rosicrucian level, the Illuminati level, perhaps even into the community of 300, but I wouldn't really put them up any higher than that. So they are important. I think they were a large part of the whole sort of coming together of organizations of within Jewish mysticism, and there are many of them with the Gnostics to bring about the concept of modern day Zionism and bringing the homeland back to the people of the Southern Kingdom, the Judean Empire versus the lost Israelite Empire of the North, so that they can speed up with the long time, with the end time. And so you get funding from all of these Gnostic and secret society groups, whether it's with the Rothschilds or however many other ones. So, and I would also link that in by also making a connection with the elders of Zion would be a very much a Kabbalistic, Messianic-based type of Kabbalism, and very much part of bringing about the Antichrist and that movement from a Gnostic European perspective. That's how they would fit in. Influential, yes. still continuing to play a significant role? I think so, but not the roles. It's part of the whole overarching organizational structure. And both the groups, whether it's the Franks or the Sabbateans, are always in their time, and even up to this day, there's not nearly as many people belonging to these groups today than there was in the past, but they're always associated with secret societies, and they are syncretic, just like I said, with that sort of global sort of Gnosticism. So I haven't spent a whole lot of time researching these groups that sort of come and go, but I did recognize them. But I just wanted to make sure by the spelling that was in the question when I saw the question that we were going to be talking about the same group, and I wasn't off on Essenes or Sabians and Joanites and organizations like that would have been before these other Gnostic, mystic, polytheist sects of Judaism.
All right. Thank you, Gary. I do believe I have the issue resolved. People in the chat, Tammy, definitely let me know if you guys can hear me or not. But the next question is from Benjamin Curry, and he's asking about the Aryan bloodline and how it's connected to Elon Musk. I would also expand. I want to get you to, if you could, include Trump's bloodline and anything that you know about either of them, if you could share.
Yeah, I mean, they're very, very good questions, and we should be aware as to how they might fit in. I would sort of suggest to people, though, that people like Elon Musk or President Trump, although they play some important sort of roles as things might move forward, they're not really going to be the significant bloodlines, right, that are going to be moving forward, particularly with whether it's false prophet or for Antichrist. But that doesn't mean the U.S. doesn't play a large role in the end time. I expect that they're going to be a dominant as one of the 10 kings as the 10 empires sort of form. So let's start with Elon Musk. And there's on the internet, you hear stories of and rumors, but again, can't get this verified that the mother of Elon Musk said that they come from watchers as their ancestors or fallen angels, but can't really verify. So Musk does not have as the last name a royale bloodline that is significant or associated with. But on the mother's side, who is rumored to have said these things, and maybe she did, I just don't have the veracity I need to come out and say that she's actually said it. Um, if I had it, I would put it in my file and I would keep it and I would use it a lot. So if somebody does have that confirmed, then send it to me because I wouldn't mind having that. So his mother's name is May Nee or Nay Haldeman. And so the mother has Swiss and English Saxon bloodlines. And there's uh, a name that is attached to her that is not how would I best frame it? Is not her real name. The Haldeman and Nay is you have to look at that as two separate words. So Nay actually means born of, and Haldeman is an old Saxon word, and that when we look at the meaning of that, that was generally used and still used in some small circles, that is her maiden name that she didn't keep. So going forward, she went as a Musk when she married. But before it was Haldeman, Haldemon, or An, I'm sorry. And that this seems to go back to the Saxons and immigration from Saxon roots to Philadelphia in about 1700s. And so when we look at that name Haldeman, that's a transliteration out of Old English. So you would have in Old English, you would have like ALD, and then you would have HAM. And so what that sort of breaks down to in its meaning is ald is the Old English word and Saxon word for old. And ham is a word in Old English for town, village, farm, or estate. So from an old town, old village, and located seemingly in north and western England in the county of Lancashire, which would be in what we would probably understand as Northumbria, and the kingship of Northumbria that goes back into the age of the Saxons and the Anglos and the Danes. And so the Saxons are from northern Germany and part of Denmark before they started their migrations to invade the Anglos. So you have different groups of people making up southern England. You have Britons, you have Anglos, you have Saxons, and then you have other groups still that are in the north. I won't go through all of them. So the Haldemen actually have a coat of arms. So this is a royal coat of arms. And the reason why I went through the establishment of the town and the city that they were located in is because only the royals, whether they're close to the governing power or further out, owned land in that old system, and continues to be a similar system in England today. So on that coat of arms, you have four owls and a helmet. So that's in heraldry, you're getting two different things. There's other things going on, but I'm just going to focus on those two things. Helmet is kind of warrior status, just like giants and Nephilim and Rephaim were heroes of old, warriors, mighty ones. And then the owls are the bird face of the cherubim. And an owl is more of a matriarchal imagery versus the raven or an eagle, which would be more a patriarchal aspect to it. So it's this owl aspect that seems to be passing down through the matriarchal bloodline from cherubim through, because there's four owls, there may be four different types of cherubim bloodlines that have been ennobled in there. So I would say that there is royalty within that comes down through the matriarchal side that passes on the genes that you might know as the gene of Isis or specific genses, as in LB gens or Julia gens or Creta genses and the various genses. So I would say that there are significant older bloodlines that are coming down, quite well diluted. But I don't have anything to show that Musk from South Africa name goes back to Dutch royalty. I was never able to find anything on that. When it comes to Trump, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that, he's comes from the German royal bloodline, which would again come from the similar region as what the Haldemans or the Aldemans would have come from in history. Trump does not have significant bloodlines. It's very, very low level. Is there some nobility that's in there? Yeah, but I don't have not found anything that I can put my finger on, and I've looked many times that would really suggest that he has anything of significant. Pseudo blue blood might be sort of the best. I know there's a lot of people that would disagree with me on that, but I just don't have enough to say he's of this particular bloodline.
Oh, fascinating. Very interesting. Um, with regard to, uh, because it seems that, he's gone against the elitist agenda, and that certainly they have tried to kill him multiple times. And so, he's definitely doing something that the elitists are not happy about. I don't know if you've ever seen, Gary, in that The Simpsons, how they depicted his assassination, and any comment on that? And then we'll go into the next question.
Yeah, it's rather interesting. Not only his assassination, but also coming down the escalator in
Right,
advance of him actually doing that, right?
right.
So um, somehow, some way, they seem to be tapped into something. So, um, but again, I just don't have enough. I have more of links for Trump that go back in terms of genealogy that would go back to Germany, but you know, and that may be somehow connected to the Trump and the Trump coat of arms out of Scotland, but I've not been able to make that sort of firm connection. Double eagle on that. Um, but that's again as far as I've gotten. Double eagle again would be cherubim, from one of the four faces of the cherubim. But it's interesting though that Trump, if you look at it, he came from the party of power, which is the Democrats, and then was not permitted to run for president. And he sort of threw that off and said, I'm too ambitious. I'm going to take over the Republican Party. So he still talks like a Democrat to this day, which is why one of the reasons why they hate them so much. And therefore, I think he's pushing for a different vision than what the European families would like to see.
Hmm.
So I think he's more akin to pushing at the Europeans for more power and control, just as President Xi and Putin are doing similar things for similar self-interested positions and with less dominance from the Western bloodlines.
Real quick question. You can make it short. Just comment if you'd like. I just wanted to ask you what you thought about Charlie Kirk and his assassination, and how that's playing out here in America.
Yeah, it's definitely a developing story that's going to leave, I think, a long-term imprint on things.
Yeah, I think so as well.
And so, yeah, and I want to see how that plays out and how that extra power is controlled and what they do with it. Does it change in its direction? But one thing is significant is and whether or not Charlie knew exactly what he was trying to do, or it was just because of the age group that he was in, but he did recognize that the future of a party generally is associated with the generations and the generation that's coming up, if you're looking at the longer term play for power. And he was eroding into that power base in an significant way. And some people even to say that Trump doesn't win the second term without Charlie Kirk, and even Trump has said that. So he had an effect that was way above his weight class, so to speak, in terms of the punch that he was able to throw at politics. So now that's hitting a momentum level, and we're going to have to see what that organization does, because it's always about what they do and what they say and what they believe. Does that change? Or are they going to be infiltrated? Or are they going to have a war against them? Because this is not going to continue to be permitted by the left if it continues.
Yeah, they are certainly sweating it, because there's a lot of people that are abandoning the party and moving to the other side, and a lot of young people that are taking up conservative viewpoints and stances. So it's going to be a very interesting time. All right, let me get to the next question. It's from Michelle Weeks, and she asks, where did the relatives of Cain's wife come from?
It's a really, really good question, because we have only questions in terms of where do they come from. At that point in time, in terms of the detail that the Bible provides for us, there shouldn't be anybody else on the earth other than Cain, other than Eve and Adam, because Abel has been killed, which is why he's sent to Nod, east of Eden. there shouldn't be anybody there. We don't have details that show beyond Adam being 130 years old when Seth is born in Genesis 5. It'll actually recorded in Genesis 4 at the end. And that after that, sons and daughters more are born, when we're not told who any of them are. And so as we look at how things are playing out in Genesis 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's not a lot of time elapsing. There's some time, but not a lot. And so you can, even if you say they spent 40 years in Eden, and then it was 40 years later until Cain and Abel are born, that's 80 years. And if you say, okay, the first fruit offerings of Cain and Abel are going to come when they reach adulthood, that would start at 20. 40 years would be 120 when you're completely at adulthood level biblically. And that's still 10 years before daughters are going to be born. So, and we don't even know whether daughters are born first or not, and how many. And so what happens with Cain is he goes east of Eden. That's east of the Euphrates rivers. We know, as from the information in Genesis 2, with the rivers, you've got the Euphrates on the east side and the Nile on the west side, and you've got basically two other rivers in there, and that land would go up to Mount Hermon, to the Sea of Aqaba, Red Sea, Indian Ocean to the south. And that's a very, very large area. But if he goes east of Eden with those sort of dimensions, it has to be on the east side of the Euphrates River, which we would understand as Sumer or Shinar, as it's written in the Bible with its transliteration. This is the home of the Blackheads, the Sumerians. That is likely the people that he's going to be running into. And so Nod has a very interesting sort of meaning, N-O-W-D, Nod or Node, and it means wandering and land of wanderers. And so it also can mean vagrancy, but if you look up the word vagrancy, it means the state of wandering. So everything, this is the land of wandering. So people might say, well, that came from Cain because he wandered. Perhaps, and may be part of it, but we still don't have an answer to who those people are and why he would build a city if there was nobody there. And typically, city was with walls, as we understand it, both before and after the flood, to protect yourself from enemies. And even if he did find one single woman outside of where Adam and Eve were living, they wouldn't have to build a city. So it makes no sense. And seemingly Cain is going to be born shortly there. Not Cain, but Enoch is going to be born shortly thereafter. So once we have those sort of details, we can now look at Genesis 1:28. And this is in day 6 when male and female are created, which are details different than what's in Genesis 2. And the details are so different. I have a document that I get asked regularly for to list out the differences and I don't believe that the Bible is in contradiction. But all of a sudden things start to fit when you understand that these people of day 6, my speculation on this, were corrupted by the fallen angels, which is why you now have another intercession by God on behalf of humans and creates Adam for a special commission going forward. And the Nahash are also a beast of the field, the serpent, that is going to deceive Eve and then Adam in the Garden of Eden. And they were at sort of the top of this and created likely first because you have the beasts of the field being created before Adam and possibly up to 1,000 years before, as you pull in 2 Peter 3 with the days 1,000 years. And that's a terrific prehistory template that's provided there to help us understand Genesis 1 and 2. So I don't believe the Bible is in contradiction. So there has to be sort of a recreation there. And then when we start looking at the details of how the people of day 6 are blessed, they're told to be, they're created in male and female and in great numbers and told to multiply and replenish the earth, to subdue it, have dominion over it. And also they were going to um, have to migrate. As you sort of look at that, they'll have to migrate or wander the whole earth to replenish the earth and have complete dominion over it. So they seem to be the nomads. And if you look at the details in Genesis 2 with Adam and Eve, they're agrarians. They're growing crops. They're growing orchards. They are growing and maintaining domesticated animals. That's why you see two different kinds of offerings in the first fruits between Cain and Abel. One of the living animals and one of the vegetation or the plants. And so when we look at the differences here, we see an agrarian society with agrarian technology now moving in with the blackhead nomads east of Sumer, people of day 6, I think, because now all of the questions get answered. It's a plausible answer as to who these people are and why there's so many, why he needs to build a city, and what does Cain provide for them? Agrarian technology and knowledge that he learned from Adam, who learned it in Eden to run this great plantation that is just, it's just crazy to imagine how two people could manage that without significant knowledge and or technology. And so he has value that he brings, and he very quickly becomes an important part of that civilization with that knowledge that he brings.
Real quick question with regard to, I think it's Jasher, no, maybe it's Jubilees. One of them, and also the primary Adamic literature, I think it's first book of Adam and Eve. It makes mention of Cain and Abel being born with twin sisters. I don't, think that's biblical as far as the canonical materials, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we would be told if there were twins.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's interesting. I don't ignore it, but my sort of disciplines that I try and do is if I can't find a way to get there biblically, I'll keep it in mind in case I run across something that might sort of connect that in down the road. But at my point where I am on this is I cannot find a way to weave that in for other people. And I'm not married to whether or not it are siblings that are intermarrying with Cain in Nod, or it's a completely different race. I'm not anti either. I just can't make the case for that. But it is something to keep in mind. It's a possibility, but the Bible typically would provide us that information to tell us where this female would come from, if it came from the Adam and Eve line or associated with the Adam and Eve line.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it seems to be clear that Cain and Abel were fraternal twins, and that that's why Eve was the mother of all living. And of course, I believe that they were two different bloodlines: the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and that's why Seth, when Abel was killed, his line, Adam's line, continued through him. But Sherry did mention how it says in Genesis 1:14 that Cain was worried about those that would kill him, and so that seems to be connected also to the people of Nod, or the the pre-Adamites, or the day 6 people.
Yeah, there's no reference that he was concerned about future generations, as some people would sort of apologize that into, so to speak. And so you have to take it was an immediate threat.
Right.
And so he had to be afraid. And then again, that would be part of that special distinction he had and cachet going into this people, that they had maybe a fear of him because he had the mark of whatever it was that was from God and protected him.
Do you think that with the city of Enoch, that was also the beginning of like weights and measures and money and that kind of
I
economic
do.
system?
I do. I think Cain never repented for what he did, and he became anti-God. And I think he started to worship the pantheon of gods, which he became totally aware of, intimately moving into the polytheist dominated people of day six, that I said that the fallen angels had likely turned completely polytheist, which was the need for the new man, Adam, to be created with to take care of all of this mess that the fallen angels were creating. So
Right.
yeah, I think he did everything to lead people away from God, and did everything in sort of an antithesis or antithetical way to what God would have advised him to do, and what he would have been raised with under Adam and Eve. So I think everything was to create that poles apart division, and he was a significant part of that. And that would come as good news, particularly with all of the extra knowledge that Cain brings with him on being able to create agrarian societies, and of course he builds a city, where you would be centered in there and you'd farm on the outside. To people who are already polytheist, it was like it's such an easy transition.
Yes, I agree with you. All right, the next question is quite a mouthful. So it's from Daniel Sullivan. He says, "It seems that many prophesied events unfold at the midpoint of the last 7 years, at the seventh trump, with the fulfillment of the mystery of God, including the abomination, the flight of Judea to the mountains, the woman getting wings of an eagle, the Antichrist attacking heaven, the war in heaven, the 144,000 on Mount Zion with the Lamb, the completion of the gospel, the fall of Babylon, and the gathering to Jesus in the clouds. How is it possible that so many events unfold in the same prophetic day and hour?"
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I would also add in there the implementation of the mark of the beast. Because as you look at Revelation 14, starting in verse 7, you have the judgment that God brings the first time he declares judgment, followed by the destruction of Babylon, followed by the implementation of the mark of the beast, followed by the declaration that God's wrath will be poured out in full measure. And this is at the midpoint of the last 7 years, when the 10 kings hand power over to Antichrist, and then and the power is handed over to him to destroy Babylon. So where I just wanted to get some of that on before I start layering in some of these other things, and there's also resurrections that are going on in this time frame as well. Christ the first fruits, and then when he comes, you have the resurrection of the uh, uh, the resurrection of the people of Judah and Israel that are announced in Daniel 12:1 after the abomination. So sometime shortly thereafter as well, that occurs in Ezekiel 37 as part of the reconciliation of Israel and Judah, in the second Exodus that is going to happen after the rapture that Jesus is going to lead. So as we look at this, there's a term that's kind of used, and you want to be careful with this, but I like this word better than hermeneutics, which I don't like, because it's a polytheist approach and it's Greek driven to understand the Greek religion and their history and mythology. And it's an interpretive approach. So I'm not a fan of the interpretive approach, especially when it's guided by what I would call the wisdom of the world. So topology is a little bit better, because topology is the study of like things. So you could have like signs, like writings, like symbols, and in this case, like scripture. So we want to sort of look at things at times in the view of typology. And so when we get this passage that comes in Revelation 10:7, for the seventh trumpet that Daniel is referencing, it says, in the days of the seventh trumpet, that he's referring to all of this. And it's such a rapid succession of events. It's like, oh, how does all of this get done? I totally get the question based on that. So if we look at the word days, it's the Greek word hemera, and it means a period, or it could also mean an age, or it could also mean a day. It could also mean years. It could also mean forever. So you have to use the definition coming out of Greek or Hebrew to what best fits the passage and typically other passages in the Bible, so you don't create any conflicts, because you can't create any conflicts just to change a meaning to make it fit, whether it's in the sentence, in the verse, or anywhere else in the Bible. That's the typology. It has to fit like passages that has these sort of references on. And so when we look at this word, it's also like the Hebrew word. Hemera would be the cognate form of yom in the Old Testament, which has pretty much the same type of meaning. And that's going to come into play when I talk a few things in the Old Testament. I may or may not get through all of this before the break, but I want to have people sort of understand how this plays into a logical and chronological order if we sort of allow it to speak for itself. But when we look at the word days, that can be understood as in Daniel 9:27. And in Daniel 9:27, this is the last 7 years of this age. It's the last week of the 70 weeks. And each of those last days of the week is a year. So we can understand it as a year, or we could understand it a larger or smaller. We need to make sure that the topology fits. So the question gets to be then, is days in Revelation 10:7 the same application that's being used in the 70 weeks? And I think there's a possibility there. Now, I wouldn't go too far along with this. And you want to be careful when you're using typology, because it has some interpreters, but you're having goalposts set up within the Bible to help keep it sort of on track, and you don't overreach with it. So when we're talking about days of the trumpet, that could mean 1 year, or it could mean a couple years. And certainly you wouldn't go more than 3.5 years, because now you'd be out of sync with those goalposts of the 7 years, because this happens at the time of the abomination when Antichrist comes to power. So do we have any other passages that would be sort of in like manner? And we do. We actually have Revelation 2:10. And in Revelation 2:10, it talks about 10 days of tribulation. And so we don't have this 10 days of tribulation that was fulfilled in the time of the church or shortly after. And then the other question gets to be, is that 10 days or is it 10 years? Because we do have tribulation that is involved in the last 7 years. You have the tribulation of the saints before the abomination, and the great tribulation not seen since creation, or the great affliction not seen since creation. That's in Matthew 24:21 and Mark 13:19. In the KJV, both of those words go back to thlipses for tribulation, or afflicted, or afflictions. It's just not consistently translated. But Mark 13:19 and Matthew 24:21 are exactly the same in terms of its typology. It's just the translation gets people a bit confused. So as we look at that particular sort of time frame, again, that happens immediately after the abomination. As we're looking at that word tribulation, that's associated with the 10 days of tribulation. First the tribulation of the saints, and then the tribulation of the world not seen since creation. So in the Old Testament now, it starts to make things a little bit more clear what's going on in terms of how we apply this term. So you have in Isaiah 34:8,
Hey, Gary, hold on
which
just
is
a
a
minute.
very,
We're at break. So I don't want,
okay, that's a
yeah,
good place to stop.
yeah. We'll pick it up at 2 after 9, and then you can go into it in greater detail. We'll be right back, everyone. About 30 seconds. And ye, take ye the likeness thereof. Learn a parable from the fig tree. So soon as the shoot thereof is come forth, and the twigs grown, the end of the world shall come. And I, Peter, answered and saith unto him, Interpret unto me concerning the fig tree, whereby we shall perceive it. For throughout all its days doth the fig tree send forth shoots, and every year it bringeth forth its fruit for its master. Oh, let me make sure. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you again for your kindness and time and patience. Zen Garcia, this is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And I'm joined this evening by Gary Wayne, author of Genesis 6 Conspiracies, Book 1 and 2, which are big time sellers and like encyclopedias of everything you need to know about the Nephilim and the giants. Real quick, I want to read this real quick for you, Gary, then ask you a question, then we'll go back into what you were talking about. But this is connected to that as well. It says, And ye, take ye the likeness thereof, learn a parable from the fig tree. So soon as the shoot thereof is come forth, and the twigs grown, the end of the world shall come. And I, Peter, answered and said unto him, Interpret unto me concerning the fig tree, whereby we shall perceive it. For throughout all the days doth the fig tree send forth shoots, and every year it bringeth forth its fruit for its master. What then meaneth thou the parable of the fig tree? We know it not. And the master, Lord, answered and said unto me, Understandest thou not that the fig tree is the house of Israel? And so I wanted to ask you what you thought was the house of Israel and how the fig tree plays into what you're talking about. But go ahead,
Yeah.
Gary.
Yeah, fig tree and all the events that Jesus is talking about in the fig tree generation will be fulfilled in that one generation. Don't let anybody change the meaning of this because they like to all of the time. Heaven and earth will pass away, but his words will never pass away. And all the events that he describes before that are fulfilled within that fig tree generation, a specific generation for the end time. So what Zen was reading is something that I'll try and get back to the Bible with, that, if you go to Judges 9, verses 8 through 15, and specifically in about verse 10, you have the fig tree and the vine as allegory being defined on as they're looking for a king to rule each of Judah and Israel. In that allegory, and it's going to be used throughout the Old Testament, is that the vine is the northern kingdom of Israel, and the fig tree is the southern kingdom of Judah. So in Deuteronomy 8, for example, you have the covenant land, which is the land of the fig trees and the vines. And there's some other trees in there as well. But again, it's setting down that prophetic allegory or typology that I was sort of referencing, and I'll get back to in a few minutes to finish off Daniel's question. And you have in First and Second Kings where Israel dwelt in safety, and everybody under the vine and a fig tree. And in Jeremiah 8, for example, getting more specific now, is you have Judah being described as figs. You have that in Jeremiah 8. You also have that in Jeremiah 2. So there are more passages as well, but understand when Jesus is going, before he gets to the point where he's asked about what the signs of the end time are, he goes up to a fig tree. keeping in mind all the disciples are Judeans at this time, and that he goes up to a fig tree and it bears no fruit. So he kills it, he curses it. Why? Because it's not bearing any fruit. The disciples know exactly what he's talking about. He knows something bad is going to happen to Israel, like in
Right.
destruction. They just don't know what. But then Jesus goes on and he starts doing the disturbance, at the temple. And then, as he's leading into this Olivet Garden oration, he's talking about Jerusalem being destroyed and the temple being destroyed. And that's when, in verse 3, in Matthew's account, you have him, and it's the best one to look at in terms of the three Gospels. And I would also recommend to use Matthew 24 as the template, but the additional details from Mark and Luke on top of the template in Matthew, because then you get the best template with easily adding on the extra details. And so they're asking him not only what will the signs of the end time be, but of your coming. And when will these events take place? And that's what Jesus is going to answer. That's why you have to look at fig tree as the generation of that fig tree. And the fig tree coming back into the covenant land begins in 1947 with the Declaration of Independence and the war in 1948. And I would probably say because Jerusalem is the epicenter of end time prophecy, is the southern kingdom possessing Jerusalem. If I were to speculate, and I do speculate on this regularly, that I think if we are in the fig tree generation, that would be the start. And that would be 40 years. And you heard me mention 40 years earlier in the show. But biblically, we also get a generation of 70 and 80 years in the book of Psalms. And then also in Genesis 6:3, when life is being limited with the creation of the giants, in the preamble to the flood story, in Genesis 6:3, 120 years. So I think we are in that fig tree generation and things are playing out. And I'm absolutely stunned at how many people, when they're talking about prophecy, will ask me when I reference on social media or on shows, what are you talking about with the fig tree generation? Well, it's in Mark, it's in Luke, and
Right.
it's in Jesus, and it's an overarching and vital sign and information for how we understand the chronology of events that he provided for us. So, yeah, fig tree generation. Um, you need to look at those accounts and look at those passages on killing the fig tree, whether it's in Mark 21 or Mark 11, Matthew 21, and Luke 13. Um, and what's interesting about that is this fig tree was located in a planted vineyard, which again is the allegory that's used where the vine and the fig tree were planted.
Yeah, absolutely. All very fascinating and very interesting. Yeah,
So
to
hopefully I,
consider.
I covered that off well enough. You have anything to add on that, Zen?
Yeah, sorry about that, Gary. I was
Okay.
muted. Trying not to have you echo out, but um, yeah, I think that definitely the fig tree, as it plays out, it was and is connected to the nation of Israel, and that we are definitely in the time of the end, that we are that last generation, and that certainly, as you said, Psalms 90:10, 70 years, 80 by strength, which puts us out to 2028. It's very interesting that there are a lot of studies now I've seen on YouTube talking about the 2028 and 2030 around those years and being connected uh, to pos- possibly the Messiah's return. Of course, we're not trying to set any date or say that it's going to be this, but in general, I mean, considering scripture possibility, but I definitely think that there's connection with the three fall feasts as well, and how Christ fulfilled the early spring and summer feasts, and yet Yom Teruah and the Day of Atonement and Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, that those three yet have fulfillment to play out. And I think that that will occur with his second advent, and that those particular feasts will be significant with his return.
Oh, they will be. Yeah. Yes. I mean, all of the feasts are prophetic in nature to help guide Israel and Judah. So to see the end time to be filled out with unfulfilled feasts yet is going to, start with the Feast of the First Fruits, and move on to the Feast of the Trumpets. So it'll be interesting to see how people in hindsight will say, "Well, that's so obvious. So why didn't I get that before?" So you could actually do a show on the feast of the Lord and their prophetic sort of nature, and go through from the Passover all the way through. So good stuff for sure.
Yeah, those are all very, very interesting. That's a great study to do. And in my mind, it shows, because you have, and I'm sure you've been asked this as well, Gary. People have asked you, are we in that little season, after the millennial reign? That some people believe that, that's where we are now, and that the millennial reign has already occurred. But yet, again, in my opinion, the second advent will fulfill those three fall feasts. And the fact that they are not yet fulfilled shows to me that the second advent has not occurred, and he will come again before the millennial reign. In my opinion, your thoughts on that, Gary?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think it's quite creative, the little season thing. But again, you can't just sort of change the meaning of things to fit your agenda. I know it happens all of the time, but little season is essentially micros, chronos. And it's only used one other time, and that's in Revelation 6, little season, micros, chronos. And the most you can sort of expand that to would be 3.5 years, not 1,000 years or 2,000 years or hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's guided by micros, which means small, short, a short season, right? Even though season can have multiple meanings and be allegorical, that narrows it down. And where passages that you have in the New Testament on where you would have season used elsewhere, and where it's going to be a longer season, you are going to get Hakanos Chronos for a long season. And so again, that guides it, that expands it. So you have to pay attention to the details as well. So and the topology has to be consistent. So at least if you're going to say that we're in the little season, you have an application where it's already been used that would be 3.5 years of where the tribulation saints would come out of. Maybe 6.5 years as you add the 10 days in that we're talking about with the topology beforehand. But you have to be consistent in the approach, not selective just because it fits your preconceived conclusion. So, and in getting back to Daniel's question now, we were talking about that kind of topology and that kind of consistency that we have to be aware of. We have to define everything in the Bible. And before we're talking about these days of the seventh trumpet, how long of a period is that with all of these events that Daniel had described, Daniel Sullivan versus Daniel of the book of Daniel, that it's to take place in the days of the trumpet. And I was on Isaiah 34, where you have the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompense for the controversy of Zion or Israel. Well, so we have a day of the Lord and vengeance. And one of the words, I won't go through all of the Hebrew on this because there's like 4 different words for wrath in the Old Testament. And it can be defined as wrath, vengeance, and a few other ways. And so you have this day of vengeance. We recognize that pretty easily as the day of the Lord in terms of one day at Armageddon. But the topology suggests, and again, you want to be careful, you might be able to say that might be a year, but you would have to have more, even with what we've just talked about with the days. And of course, that's the Hebrew word yom there, as we talked about, cognate to Hamera, that is for the days, and the days in Greek of the seventh trumpet. So, and the word rakapants can be understood as reward. So the day of the Lord's vengeance as the reward for the controversy of Israel, or retribution or revenge for the controversy that Israel has gone through, or both. And I think it's probably a bit of both, but we'll get some nuances that will help sort of expand that notion. So in Isaiah 61, again, you have the year of the Lord and the day of vengeance. Okay, so now we're getting a year that's used again with day. So it could be talking in both Isaiah 61 and 34 that there is a day and a year of vengeance. And then Isaiah 63:4, you get the day of vengeance has come and the year of the redeemed has come, because Israel is going to be redeemed in that year of the Lord's favor. That's talked about in Isaiah 61. That's part of the second Exodus and the reconciliation. So you have these interchangeable terms that are suggesting a year of favor that Israel is going to be reconciled when their resurrection and their second Exodus is going to take place, and they're brought back in as the bride in time for the supper of the Lamb just before the Armageddon, or the actual day of the Lord. And so now this starts to make sense when you go to Hosea 9:7, where you have the days of his visitation, the days of Jehovah, who is the Jehovah of the Elohim. The cognate term in the New Testament would be the word of God, the logos, the word logos of the God Theos in the New Testament. And there's days of that visitation. Yom again. Could be one day, could be multiple days, could be a few years. And again, as we define this, it all needs to be consistent. And you have the days of his visitation and the days of his recompense. Okay, for Israel again. So retribution and reward for Israel as it connects. So I think, and you could go, there's 1 year that's going to be for the redeemed, and 1 year for the vengeance, but I think it's 2 separate years, or they're overlapping, but we're talking about at least a year. And that's kind of the point. So, and as we talked about before the break, that you've got a maximum, if this is a mid last 7-year event, a maximum of 3.5 years. Now we've said it can be a maximum of, if there's a year of the Lord's vengeance, which it clearly says, then that's going to be 2.5 years. And if there's an additional year of the Lord's favor, that's also talked in Luke, for people who want, in Luke 4, if they want to double check the New Testament reference that's based on Isaiah 61, now you would have 1.5 years. But if that was all in 1 year or overlapping, you would have a little bit more time. So up to 2 to 2.5 years. So that's probably the time frame. Now, how do we get other typology? You've seen how I've used the typology on that. You've seen how I've used the typology on the fig tree generation. Some of those events is in this prophetic hour that Daniel is talking about. Let's say, and when I say some of the events that Daniel listed versus some of the other things I was talking about in the Old Testament, separating a distinction between prophecy for Israel and Judah, which is distinct and parallel than with the church. You have to keep those separate. So at the end of Revelation 11, you have the death of the 2 witnesses. And they were to prophesy for 3.5 years. So if you get the start of the last 7 years and they come to prophesy for that, that's leading you to the midpoint. And when they are slain and resurrected, that's at the end of the 6th trumpet. And it's the hour that they're killed in. So that's the hour that seems to be beginning, that's going to overlap into the days of the seventh trumpet, starting at the midpoint, starting at the abomination and moving forward. So keep that prophetic hour in mind. That's the Greek word hora. So when we now move to some of the events that Daniel is talking about, we have the destruction of, let's move back a step on that. Let's go back to Revelation 17, where the 10 kings are going to give their power over to Antichrist to come to power and to destroy Babylon. And that is in an hour. That's the prophetic hour. Greek word hora. When we now look at the destruction of Babylon, as we get the details in Revelation 18, it's destroyed in an hour. That's the Greek word hora, the prophetic hour. In Revelation 7, after the 144 witnesses have been redeemed as first fruits, as in Christ, the first fruits, and afterwards, then when he comes, those who are his, which is those who are asleep, not martyred as the first fruits are, and those still alive, as you get that through to the rapture event from 1523 to 24 to 1550 to 54. So as we start to sort of understand all of that, we have this judgment that comes immediately following the 144,000 first fruits that are redeemed, kind of like the 24 elders. I would include them as first fruits as well. I would likely include the Revelation 6 saints who are waiting for the tribulation of the saints in the first 3.5 years as also martyred first fruits. You have the judgment in Revelation 7 immediately after the 144,000 are redeemed, whereby you have the judgment being proclaimed for the first time by God, not by what people on the earth are saying, or the wrath of the Lamb, as they're talking about from the leaders to the people to the slaves, that the destruction of the seals is so great. That's what they're saying. That's not what God is saying. And those in Revelation 6 are told to wait a little bit longer after, when will you avenge and judge the people who did this to us? Right? So
Yes.
again, you see the perfection of prophecy if you let it sort of play out. So when we look at this judgment in Revelation 14, this is the start of the summary events for the last 3.5 years. So the next event that follows, which is in verse 8, is the destruction of Babylon. After the hour of judgment, when that hour came, the prophetic hour. This is what also you could look at as Matthew 21 to 24 is talking about multiple antichrists. When that's talked, and that's after the abomination, versus ones that would be there before the abomination, at the start of the Great Tribulation. Just as in the epistles of John, you have these multiple antichrists coming in the last time. And you match that up with what Jesus is saying, and you have the typology and the Greek word to back you up. Because last times actually comes from hora. It should be translated in the same way. It should be a little bit more consistent. Unfortunately, it's not. So as we look at this hour, we get this prophetic hour that is the same language that Jesus says that's the hour he's going to come back on. Not the exact literal hour, but within this prophetic hour. And that's why you have the typology with the last trumpet, which is the same word as trumpet in the Greek. that you have in the rapture prophecies, when the mystery of God is going to be fulfilled as promised to all of his prophets. So everything fits. Now, there's 1 hour that I haven't talked about, which is absolutely key. And then I'm going to give people an assignment to go and look afterwards, because I could talk on prophecy forever. I just love it. You have the hour of trial in Revelation 3:10. So it's preceded by the hour of temptation that we're going to be saved out of, just as we'll be saved from the wrath. Those are the two things that are going to have to be in effect that we're saved from, lest even the elect would be deceived. I'm going to come back to that in a second. So you have the temptation of the church that we're going to be saved out of, and then you have the hour of trial that comes upon the whole world. I want people to go read for themselves these three other passages for the typology and the timing. Matthew 24:21, the time of the great tribulation not seen since the creation of the earth, and read the few verses after that. Then go to Mark 13:19, where it says the affliction not seen since creation or the beginning of the world. And that's exact same language, again, immediately after the abomination. And then go to Daniel 12:1, after the abomination, in the time of trouble, Sarah, which is the cognate Hebrew word for thlipses, for tribulation, affliction, afflicted, persecution, all words like that. It's used in the same way in the Old Testament. And this is the time of the reconciliation of Israel after the rapture. And the same word for Jacob's trouble, Sarah, that's used for the time of the second Exodus, that Jacob is going to be saved out of this time of Jacob's trouble. It's the typology gives you the timing. And what happens in this hour of trial that Christians need to be saved of, it is the next event in the summary in Revelation 14, which is verse 9. That is the mark of the beast implementation. That's what we're to be saved from that hour of trial. Why? Go back to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but go to the Matthew event where Jesus says, in the time of these antichrists, in the time of the great tribulation, that even the elect would be deceived. That's why we're saved from that particular timing. So that happens shortly after the beginning of the last 7 years, but some spin-off events will take a little bit longer once we're pulled out. Babylon gets destroyed, Mark gets implemented, and a few other events are going to happen. But you see how that typology, if you let the Bible fit together, gives you the chronology and gives you the definitions and the certainty as to a chronology of events. You don't get exact dates and things like that, but you're going to see the signs and the seasons that Jesus has instructed to us. And of course, the typology is that this is the hour Jesus comes back for rapture. It's in perfection if you let it. And so you want to be careful with people who are saying they're using typology to infer something. What they have to be able to provide is passages that define the typology they're trying to enter in to move it to an allegorical meaning. And so you have to hold them to that. They're going to have their heads explode when you do, but they just want you to believe them that this is what it says, because they can divinely or rightly divide. And they use that as a blank check to change any verse that they want. So any typology that they're going to use, have them have that defining typology, and it ought to be associated with prophecy as well, or at least for the concept that's being talked about. Just as Babylon is a mystical religion and it's compared to sinning through prostitution and adultery. In the Old Testament, you get definitions called where if Israel is worshiping false gods, that is adultery and prostitution from an allegorical perspective. So, yes, all of these events can happen. I think we have up to a year for sure, maybe a year and a half for all of these events to take place, because after rapture, Jesus goes back and is on the earth because he comes back in the clouds. And if you look at rapture ones, look at all of the ones in the clouds without an army as your typology. Because Jesus leaves in the time of the disciples, just as he will come back. There's two angels there. He's going to come back with his angels. He's going to come back in the clouds. Armageddon has an army and he's riding a horse. It's different language there. Don't let them conflate those. And this becomes the days of the visitation in the Old Testament. And then check these two verses out. Luke 17, 22 and 26, where it says, the days of the Son of Man that people are going to long for. He's coming for a longer period of time. This is the start of the second coming. And I think he comes for rapture, then second Exodus, and then Armageddon. So you get into a math problem if you say Armageddon is the second coming. So you either have to say Armageddon is the fourth coming, rapture is the second coming, and second Exodus would be the third coming, or all of those are part of the days of the Son of Man, as the Bible tells us, part of his days of visitation in the Old Testament. That is the second coming. It includes all three of those events, and I think that's probably the best position on that.
Yeah, thank you for that very in-depth and well laid out answer, Gary. For those that, again, because there's some people in the chat that think that we're in the little season, but again, it's very clear that during the millennial reign, Christ is here on the earth with us. And, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are present in the temple. And all the nations are, it says in Isaiah that we will celebrate the Kodesh and also the Sabbath, the Shabbats, and the feast days as laid out by the Most High. And clearly that, if we were in that little season leading up to when Satan is loosed again, Christ would be here with us because according to the millennial reign, he is here with us during that 1,000 years of the Sabbath rest.
And he doesn't leave.
Exactly.
And Jesus, with his authority and whoever he uses as an angel to release Satan, is done at the behest of Jesus and God.
Exactly.
So, and then at whatever point in time, and I think a very short point of time, Satan will raise an army and march on Jerusalem where Jesus is. We do not get scripture where Jesus leaves.
Right.
If we're in the little season, why isn't he in Jerusalem? And why don't we see drafting of people around the world to become this great nation, this great army to march on Jerusalem?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think, the scriptures also mention a strong delusion and a great falling away before the man of sin is revealed. It's my opinion that we are near approaching that particular time, and that the 3.5 years, as is shown by the two witnesses being killed in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days, and then you have them celebrating and sending gifts to each other, those that are part of the New World Order. That is yet, in my opinion, still future and on the horizon as well. Your thoughts on that, Gary?
Yeah, I agree. There's not scripture that tells us that week, the last 7 years, is separated. So it happens all at once, according to
Right.
how Daniel presents that. It happens all at once as Revelation presents the 3.5 years that you get with the commission of the two witnesses, with the reign of Antichrist, and with the protection of those who flee Judea in Revelation 12. Right, so
Yes.
it's consistent with that week of years, which it needs to be. And so, people who think that half of it or all of it was completed at the destruction of the temple, it doesn't fit with Jesus' coming, the rapture, and Armageddon, and the abomination, which all happen in that one fig tree generation.
Right.
It's just not possible for
Right.
that to happen. And we get the rise of Antichrist. So whether or not he's part of the last 7 years in that sort of thought process or not, because that approach has several different nuances to it, we have they will actually go to the point of saying that the abomination happened in about just before, or just before 200 BC, or just after 200 BC. I'm sorry. Um, in the time of the Greek Empire with the abomination, and they expect you to believe that Jesus was talking about an event that happened 200 years before he did that prophecy, but placed it as a prophecy. Jesus would not make that mistake.
Right.
And we see Antichrist rising amongst the horns in Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 as the little horn. We get Antichrist rising to power in Daniel 11:21-31, where he brings his armies in with the abomination, which matches up with Luke's account of the armies surrounding Jerusalem at the time of the abomination. And they'll say, well, that wasn't the abomination that Jesus was talking about. Well, it's the same abomination timing that we get coming from other passages in Daniel 2, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12. And Jesus' instructions were to understand the abomination and that time. You go and place everything I'm saying, you place all the events and define it around what Daniel said, but place it around my events.
Yes.
Once you've done that, then you can go to Revelation, because you want to be so careful with Revelation not to add or delete anything. So you need to have the template. Matthew 24, add on the additional details from Mark and Luke, then go to Daniel, put all of those events into the template, then you can go to Revelation. Then you can go to the rest of the New Testament prophecies with rapture and whichever ones else, put them all in there, and then you can go to the Old Testament. Everything will fit like a glove.
Absolutely. Donna Smith asks, Gary, do you have a chronology teaching on the end time events?
Not one that has everything. In the last conference that Zen had put on, I think it's just over 2 years ago now, I did cover off some end time topics, but I also put some chronology there. That would be the closest thing that would be on video. There is a project that's coming up. I'm still waiting to see whether it's still a go, where I'll be doing a curriculum on it. But that will be at the end of November if that comes about. So we'll see whether or not that comes forward. It's a lot of work to do it. I sort of keep it in my head. But to put every piece of puzzle together into one linear thing, it gets to be huge.
It's a lot, yes.
So I use the template, and then I can slide any piece in and out that I want.
Right on. Nice. Maybe sometime we can do an AMA that is specific just to the end time chronology and give you a chance to present and have people ask questions according to your presentation. Yeah. That would be an awesome show, I think. But we got about 16 minutes remaining, Gary, and wanted to ask you just your pulse on where we are. Because, of course, as it says in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, what is critical to understand about the end of days is the blooming of the fig tree, as we've talked about previously and going into, and how
Yeah.
that's connected to Israel and how that all came about in 1947, the announcement, 1948, the nation was recreated. And of course, there's many scriptures about how Israel will come together as a nation in a single hour, in a single day, once again. So, in the time that we are, and just what are your thoughts? What are you looking for with where we are in current events? What kind of things do you feel, might be a signpost for the man of sin to be revealed, and all of the other things going down as you've laid it out here this evening?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm still looking for more things start to come together. I know things are starting to speed up. So where I kind of place us, we're still in the sorrows, and we're seeing wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, famine, and earthquakes getting stronger, and probably more rumors of war with some wars. We need to see those catastrophes get stronger more often with more intensity. Because I think those contrived catastrophes will get to a point where the false prophets of Babylon come on, who are going to predict apocalyptic prophecies to convert to the one true religion or be destroyed from the face of the earth, have to come on. I think we need Babylon in place as the glue to bring about the last 7 years, which is why the Revelation 2:10 of 10 days of tribulation, with Babylon coming on the scene before the start of the last 7 years, is going to be starting persecution, and it gets stronger as it goes through, which will get, as you get into the last 7 years, and then Antichrist takes it over after destroying Babylon and takes it to another level with the mark of the beast and beheading and all the other things. So I think we need Babylon in place, because out of Babylon, I think Antichrist is going to be working with, as well as the New World Order people, to be the one that's going to negotiate the covenant. And Babylon rides the beast of empires and controls them with the reins as she rides them. So much so that the 10 kings are going to grow jealous of her, which is why they give power over to Antichrist at the midpoint. We're seeing perhaps the rise of a universal religion on the horizon, and perhaps a world government, but we haven't seen those contrived catastrophes yet to get there. And they could be apocalyptic. Like if we had a destruction of these combined catastrophes that was 10% of the population, you get close to 1 billion people killed. That would seem like the end of the world.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But yet 25% is even more.
Right.
And the reaction of all the people on the earth in Revelation 6 is this is the wrath of the Lamb. It's so horrible. But we're still waiting for the trumpets at 33% proportion.
Right.
And that it's still not as bad as what the wrath bowl is being poured out in full measure in Revelation 14:10 and 15:1 and 7. Cups are full, and you get the same typology used for this destruction being poured out in the Old Testament as in the book of Psalms, and some other passages as well, that it's going to seem like Armageddon, but it's not. So expect the wars to have similar wars that are going to be big, that seem like Armageddon as well. And the difference is that it's the measure. 100%, 33%, 25%, less than 25% before the last 7 years. And that when the wrath does come, all flesh would be killed at full measure, except that Jesus steps in.
Yes. Yes, unless the days be shortened, there should be no flesh left. Um, Question with regard to also the where we are now. When do you think the new heavens and the new earth come into place?
Well, I think we're pretty much told that after Revelation 20
Yes. With the descent of New Jerusalem?
at the end of the millennium.
Yes.
Yep. Yes. So after the judgment, um, and before the judgment is the war. Then we go right into the resurrection of the dead, and then we go into a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, we've got just a few minutes remaining, Gary. I just wanted to give you a chance. Anything of interest that you'd like to share, even if you want to talk about what you're working on with any upcoming books that I know you said that you were working on the Genesis 3. Is that your focus? Are you already currently writing that? And do you have a timetable for possible release?
I am currently have about 10 chapters done on it. What I've done is I still have a fairly hectic fall schedule, but I'm starting to for not do as many interviews. I'm trying to keep it down to 3 or 4 a week so that I can create some time to finish that book. So I would say to finish that book, it would take another year of devoting enough time to be able to do it. And then you go into the editing and publication process that can be 1 to 2 years after that. So the trick is to get the narrative down to a point where I can get it down to about a year period where it's going through the editing process.
I have another question since you are a resident of Canada. What do you think about Alberta leaving Canada and joining the U.S.? Have you heard anything about all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a rising discontent in the West, but it's been there since Confederation. It's running about 30% on the polls right now, so there's going to be a plebiscite or a a voting process on this to see where they are on it. And it really comes down to Albertans don't, for the most part, do not want to leave Canada. What they want is a better deal within Canada, that those who control the left-wing hegemony in Canada don't want to provide for the West. Although our new prime minister is talking about trying to address that. We'll see whether he does it or not. I do not think you're going to see them moving right away. I think there could be more tectonic shifts that might add to a splitting of not only Canada, but a splitting from the US, where you might envision coming out of that from maybe similar but different things and events happening in Canada and the US, that you might see the West move in with a lot of continental US as you go down that sort of rust section versus the wings on the coastlines, except for Florida. You could see something like that forming. I think we were on the precipice of actually getting there before President Trump stepped in and has absolutely spoiled any sort of willingness, Alberta, Saskatchewan, or otherwise, of becoming part of the U.S. in any form or way.
I just saw, some talk about that. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on it. Final question. What are your thoughts on Dmitry Dudelman's vision that he received about Russia and China teaming up together and attacking the United States?
Yeah, I would be a bit careful with that. I think there's a direction there that makes sense. And that I do see Russia and China lining up. I would also see India going with that. I would see Persia as part of India or a separate part going with that.
The BRICS
I see five
nations?
ending up on one side, five ending up. The BRIC nations, that could be maybe Brazil is part of that, and
Right.
whatever economic zone that they're going to so I see that sort of forming again, so 5 on each side, 5 toes.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And but what I don't see prophetically is China getting involved in a world war till Armageddon, as the kings of the East, or the Sinim. So, but I do see Russia being involved on the Gog War, Joel 1 and 2, and in Revelation 9. I do see a Prince of the Covenant that's going to be destroyed, as talked about in Daniel 11. I do see that this war, God is going to step up and destroy the Gog alliance, which happens as an extension of the first woe. As you line up those 3 large wars of Gog, Joel 1 and 2, and Revelation 9, that Antichrist is likely going to take credit for at the time of at the time when the Prince of the Covenant is going to be severely damaged. I would read sort of Isaiah 17 if you're looking for a U.S. sort of component to that, with the land of whirring wings. That's to me describing the U.S. in the account, and what happens in the time of the trumpets. So do I think that Russia and the U.S., and maybe with support of China, could launch a war to try and prevent the U.S. from stopping that invasion of the Middle East when that comes? That's a possibility, but I don't see direct positioning of China to be there within prophecy.
Well, hey, Gary, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and your commitment to do these shows once a month. We greatly appreciate you, and everybody in the chat room appreciates you being able to ask you questions and interact with you directly in this way. It's a great blessing for everybody. And so, if you would, just give out your website and your info one more time, where people can go to hear you, listen to your work. And I know that you also reply when you can to all the people that reach out and get in contact with you. So if you would, share your social contacts again.
Absolutely. So the best way to get a hold of me is through my website, the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's the number 6conspiracy.com. On that website, I have a contact the author. That's my website email. It's genesis6conspiracy@gmail.com. So, but you can just click on that. But in case you forget or can't find it, Genesis6conspiracy.com, again with the number 6. And be patient, and I will get back to you. I go in order. And so if you're also looking to support me, then you can go to the Buy Now page, and there are 3 Buy Now pages. And I have a generous excerpt of each of the books on the book section, so you can get a good feel for the books. I think just the table of contents, let alone the excerpts, will probably get your interest. But that's me, I'm biased. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. So buy page 1 is for book 1. Buy page 2 is book 2. Buy page 3 is where you bundle, and you can bundle in quantities. You can also get volume discounts for buy page 1 for book 1 and buy page 2 for book 2, but it's only there for multiples of the same book. So if you want to get a combination, go to buy page 3. If you get that wrong and you order 3 books and you wanted 2 of one and 1 of the other, just send me an email. I do watch emails coming in for book purchases. So you can say, hey, I wanted 2 of this and 1 of that. And if you had a longer quotation that you wanted that wouldn't fit in how you want it signed, you can send that in to me too, and I'll match that up for you, and I'll confirm everything back. And so there's also links over to Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, BarnesandNoble.com, and also links over to Amazon for the Kindle versions of both books and the Audible versions of both books.
Excellent. I'm going to reach out to you, Gary. I want to do a barter autograph copy of your latest book, because, of course, I've got your first, but I definitely would like a copy of your second, and definitely want to read it and catch up on it. And so I'll send you, some of my latest releases or whatever. You can just go to sacredwordpublishing.com, pick out whatever you want, let me know, and we'll do a barter, we'll do a trade, and then I'll get back with you, and I'll be well
Sounds
informed
good.
on your second book as well. So
Yeah, it's a good read, and I don't. There's no other book in the market out there that talks about giants and prehistory out of the Bible like this one does, and then links those terms into a chronology for the end time.
oh yeah, I know your books are like an encyclopedia, a full set of encyclopedia of esoteric subjects. So very much looking forward to reading and studying it. All right, everybody, we appreciate all of you. Thank you, Gary, and have a good night, everybody. And you too, brother, and I'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, all. Shalom.